Lee Van Cleef was born on January 9th, 1925, in Somerville, New Jersey, far from the dusty landscapes that would later define his cinematic legacy. Raised in a disciplined household by a watchmaker father, Van Cleef learned early the value of patience, precision, and quiet focus. These traits would later shape both his screen presence and his professional reputation. Before acting, he served in the United States Navy during World War II as a sonar operator, an experience that exposed him to danger, responsibility, and long periods of silence, elements that subtly influenced his acting style. After the war, he briefly studied engineering before turning toward Hollywood, where success came slowly. Tall, angular, and intense, Van Cleef did not fit the traditional mold of a leading man, but he possessed something rarer, an ability to command attention without raising his voice. This quiet power would become his signature. Early Hollywood years and the struggle for recognition. Van Cleef's early Hollywood career was marked by persistence rather than instant fame. He appeared in numerous, small, often uncredited roles throughout the 1950s, frequently cast as henchmen, soldiers, or outlaws who rarely spoke but always stood out. His appearance, sharp cheekbones, narrow eyes, and a naturally intimidating stare made him ideal for antagonistic roles, yet it also limited opportunities. Directors saw him as reliable but rarely essential, and his career plateaued just as television westerns began to dominate the market. A serious car accident temporarily halted his work, further complicating his path forward. Despite these setbacks, Van Cleef continued refining his craft, learning how to communicate emotion through posture, silence, and subtle expression. While others chased stardom, he built credibility. These difficult years laid the foundation for a later resurgence that few could have predicted, proving that endurance can be as powerful as talent. Reinvention. Through the spaghetti. Western Revolution. Van Cleef's career transformed dramatically in the mid-1960s when Italian director Sergio Leone recognized his untapped potential. Cast in for a few dollars. More in Later the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Van Cleef was no longer a background figure. He was central to the story's tension. His portrayal of Angel Eyes remains one of cinema's most chilling antagonists, defined not by exaggerated cruelty, but by calm inevitability. Unlike traditional Hollywood villains, his characters felt realistic, morally ambiguous, and unsettlingly human. These films redefined the Western genre, replacing clear heroes and villains with complex figures driven by survival and greed. Van Cleef's performances embodied this shift perfectly. International audiences embraced him, and for the first time, Hollywood took notice. His success overseas demonstrated that talent overlooked at home could flourish elsewhere, turning him into a global icon and a symbol of artistic reinvention. A villain. With depth, dignity, and humanity. What set Lee Van Cleef apart was his refusal to portray villains as simple obstacles. Even when playing ruthless gunmen or bounty hunters, he infused them with intelligence, restraint, and personal codes of honor. Films like Day of Anger and Death Rides a Horse showcased aging gunslingers burdened by regret and experience rather than ambition. Van Cleef understood that menace did not require excess. It lived in stillness, timing, and intention. His characters often spoke less than others, yet dominated scenes through presence alone. Audiences sensed there was a past behind those eyes, a life that shaped every decision. This emotional layering elevated him from genre actor to cinematic craftsman. By giving villains dignity and complexity, Van Cleef helped change how antagonists were written and performed, influencing generations of actors who learned that silence, when used well, could be louder than words. Beyond westerns, expanding his screen identity. Although westerns defined his legacy, Van Cleef refused to be confined by them. In the late 1970s and 1980s, he transitioned into action films and television, adapting seamlessly to changing cinematic trends. Roles in Escape from New York and The Octagon introduced him to younger audiences, where his commanding presence translated effortlessly into modern settings. His voice, posture, and disciplined physicality gave him credibility as authority figures, mercenaries, and mentors. On television, he reached households worldwide, proving his versatility beyond the big screen. While these later roles lacked the mythic quality of his Western work, they demonstrated longevity and adaptability. Van Cleef did not chase relevance. He earned it by evolving. His willingness to accept diverse roles reflected a practical understanding of the industry and a deep respect for the craft of acting, regardless of platform or genre. A private man and a devoted family figure off-screen, Lee Van Cleef lived a far quieter life than his character suggested. He was married 3 times and remained deeply devoted to his children, valuing family despite the demands of a demanding career. A well-known accident that cost him part of a finger occurred not on set, but while building a playhouse for his daughter, a small but telling detail that revealed his priorities. He rarely spoke publicly about personal matters, preferring privacy over publicity. Colleagues often described him as reserved, professional, and generous with younger actors. Unlike many stars of his era, Van Cleef did not cultivate controversy or excess. His sense of responsibility, shaped by military service and early hardship, guided his choices. This grounded personal life stood in stark contrast to the violent worlds he portrayed, reinforcing the idea that strong screen personas often mask deeply thoughtful individuals. Hollywood tensions and unspoken rivalries. Like many actors working within the same genre, Van Cleef experienced professional tensions, particularly with figures who symbolized traditional Hollywood westerns. Differences in acting philosophy, career trajectory, and creative approach occasionally created distance rather than friendship. Van Cleef gravitated toward morally complex stories, while others represented older, more idealized visions of the American West. These contrasts were less about personal animosity and more about generational and artistic shifts within the industry. As westerns evolved, so did the conversations surrounding them. Van Cleef's success in European productions highlighted Hollywood's resistance to change, and his later recognition served as quiet validation. Rather than engaging in public disputes, he let his work speak for itself. The absence of loud conflict speaks volumes. Van Cleef understood that longevity comes not from dominance, but from adaptability, respect, and consistency in one's craft. Later years and quiet professional grace. In his later years, Van Cleef continued working despite health challenges, demonstrating the same resilience that defined his early career. Though roles became smaller, his performances never lost their authority. Directors valued his reliability, and audiences continued to respond to his unmistakable presence. He approached aging not as a limitation, but as an asset, allowing time to deepen his portrayals. There was no attempt to relive past glory. Instead, he embraced where he was in life. This humility earned him lasting respect within the industry. As trends shifted and westerns faded from prominence, Van Cleef remained relevant by being authentic. His final performances carried a reflective quality, as if acknowledging the journey behind him. Even as the spotlight dimmed, his influence endured, reminding viewers that careers built on craft rather than spectacle age with grace. Legacy and influence on modern cinema. Lee Van Cleef passed away on December 16, 1989, but his impact continues to ripple through film history. He helped redefine what a Western antagonist could be, turning villains into mirrors of human complexity rather than caricatures of evil. His work influenced filmmakers who sought realism, moral ambiguity, and emotional restraint. Today, his performances are studied for their discipline and efficiency, proof that less can truly be more. Film scholars often credit him with bridging classical Hollywood and modern cinema, embodying the shift from myth to realism. His characters remain unforgettable not because of what they said, but because of what they suggested. Van Cleef's legacy is not one of loud heroics, but of quiet mastery. In an industry that often rewards excess, he stands as evidence that restraint, patience, and authenticity can leave the deepest mark.